Hey, welcome back. It's John from thenetguy.com, and I'm here to show you today how to take your Dell 9020 from my last video and put it in a standard ATX case. This case was provided by Gamdias. It's the Talos M1. It's a nice mid-tower ATX design. Includes RGB and an RGB controller. So stick around and I'll show you how to do this. So I'm going to start by pulling the front bezel off and anything else that's very easily removable. So that front bezel is going to come right off of there, and I'm going to set that to the side. Look around here for anything else that's easily removable. I've got my hard drives, remove the power connectors. Now I don't have a SATA tray for this SSD drive, but on my new case it's not going to matter. So I'm going to set the drive off to the side. Not really worried about how all this stuff's plugged in. We'll deal with that when we get it in the new case. That's 2 terabyte hard drive. Set that over here. And then I'm going to go for the power connectors. So this is our power supply adapter. This is the 24-pin to 8-pin motherboard adapter that we had. Now I'm going to need to use this in the new case, but I'm going to set it off to the side just to make it a little bit easier to get around in here. Now this is a non-modular power supply, so all of these cables are going to be a little bit of a nightmare on the next case to insert. But if you do yourself a favor and you pick up a modular power supply, you can save yourself quite a bit of time and energy here by just having to deal with the cords that you need. Remove some of the other connectors. I've taken the screws out of the power supply as we go. Now I can leave the CPU fan and everything connected to the motherboard. This is also a great time to knock the dust off of your case. If you've got an air compressor, go ahead and blow out all of the items as you're moving. A couple things to watch out for. This has a traditional USB 3 I/O header on the motherboard, but it has a non-traditional front panel header. So if you try to take this motherboard and you put it directly into the other case and you try to go put those pins, there's nowhere to go. Now I've tried a few things. I'll show you what options I have here in a little bit, but one of the easiest and simplest things, if you don't need this case anymore, this one screw that you see right here, if you just take that screw out of the front panel, right like so, slide this up and outward, you're going to see that all of that I/O that we were talking about is actually just connected to that panel. So the power supply is free now, but to get it out, you're going to have to push this one tab on the bottom side, which helps it slide free. You may or may also need to move some of this around. And now I can get the power supply out. There's another motherboard header for power. Now, another astute viewer actually pointed out here that I was continuing to use the motherboard SATA power connectors in here. And I can actually switch to the SATA connectors from the power supply and save myself just that much more wiring inside this case. The one nice thing about this Dell case is the tool-free design. So most of the things that I want to do here I can do without tools. Now with this PCI Express video card, I do have to push the release tab there. Now I've got my video card free, I can set that to the side. I'm going to leave the RAM in the motherboard. I'm going to remove the PC speaker. This looks like a traditional PC speaker connector. Oop, nope, it's a 5-pin. So we're going to have to look at that. Now the Talos M1, which we're going into, includes the PC speaker connector. So I am going to borrow some of these SATA cables. Partially because they have 90-degree ends, and that can be really useful if you need to put a hard drive into a tight corner here. This is the USB header, so I got to push the tab down to release it, and you can pull that out. Now, interestingly enough, this is not proprietary, this is standard, but proprietary is this front panel header connector, which is also a USB connector. I think there's even a thermal probe up front here we need. I'll need to look into that. Yeah, so this item here, believe is the thermal probe, and we're just going to carry that off onto our new case. So we'll pull that out. The power switch also, again, is proprietary on this one. This one's kind of neat. It has a couple diodes in it. I saw the schematic for this one on the Linus Tech forum, but if you look in here, it's got a power switch, and then it has two more connectors, and if you don't have these properly grounded out, you can't actually start the board up. And so that's something that's very important. A lot of guys will take and just bring this whole cord over from the old motherboard and bring that out to the other case. So here I'm just going to take these off. I can remove the I/O. Remove the I/O shield. So I'm going to preserve this. I'm going to take this I/O shield to the other computer. Even though I'm going to use a different USB 3 for the front, if I plug this directly in, I can stop it from warning about some things that I don't want it to have airing out. Now, some guys will just chop this off and plug it directly in. I think that's because there's some wiring down in here that it senses, but I'm going to just take that whole thing wholesale into my new case because I can hide that somewhere in the case. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to take off these screws. Now, interestingly enough, the Talos M1 we're going into has black screws. A lot of the new motherboards are black. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws so far. When I get this one over here, you do have to be careful. I'm generally being pretty careful here. If you drop a screwdriver on the wrong part of this board, these little micro traces are really easy to cut and break, and you don't want to have to buy another motherboard here. So I'm going to just be real careful as I go. Making sure to take the screws out. Okay. Nope, that's what I was talking about. Okay, the motherboard is free now after removing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws so far. The motherboard is free. There's a chassis intrusion detector here. Now you may or may not want to keep that, but this is pushed down when your chassis intrusion detector is open, so you know if somebody's opened your computer. But to take these ones off, this is kind of interesting. You pull, take these rubber ones off. It's interesting, you can pull and slide them through. They're generally one way. Okay, now I'm going to keep this fan header just in case. I'm going to take it off right now, but I'm going to keep it just in case I need it later when I get to my other computer. I do have a new rear case fan. Now I'm going to remove the motherboard. There we go. So that's the motherboard free from the case, ready to go into my new computer. Now, optionally, if you want, you can take the PC speaker out. This is for your bells and beeps. And this one is finished. One last thing that we're going to want to save is actually this I/O panel here. So this is transportable between them. It's a standard I/O panel. So you're just going to be able to push and wedge it past this little opening. We're going to drop that into our new case, and it's going to look nice and professional. So we're going to switch over to the Gamdias M1 case now. Much bigger, much heavier. Another trick on this is I'm going to pull this off to allow us to work on it. This tempered glass on this case is special in that it comes off, and I'm going to set that off to the side. Now again, very similar standoffs and layouts. I always like to get things out of the way, and I like to look at the standoff pattern and just make sure I'm not going to have any problems with fitments, fans, anything like that. So far, so good. That one matches in the front. I'm looking at those two. I will want to add a standoff here. So if you look this about the third slot over, there's a standoff spot. I'm going to need to add one of those from the included standoffs. I don't have a standoff on that lower side, back side, back side. There's one here and one here in the board. So I'm going to have to add one here, one here, one here, and one here on the board. Now, just to double check, because there was two I see now. Yep, it's the furthest lower one of the two here. So to start the reinstallation, I'm going to put the Motherboard IO shield in, and I just happen to know that the PS2 ports go towards the top side of the case. Now, it should fit in nicely, which it does. Make sure it's nice and snapped in there, because you're not going to have another chance to come back and fix it easily once you're done. Now I'm going to get the included hardware kit that came with the Gamdias, and I'm going to look for the standoffs. It also actually includes a couple things like a cleaning cloth for the tempered glass front, and there's a bag of standoffs and bushings, and I'm going to look for the standoffs. So I'm talking about motherboard standoffs. That is what I'm looking for. Those little hexagonal screws that I can put into the motherboard. So I'm going to take those out of the way. We said we needed one here. Now, I've never really used tools to put these in. They usually hold plenty tight, just with a nice hand snugging, especially when these light case designs, they don't have a lot of extras. So there's our standoffs. Now it looks like I am just going to have enough standoffs in the kit. Actually, I'm going to be one shy because over here, but there are two standoffs in the case already on the lower side, which I can borrow from. Okay, so I'm going to take, and like I said, I'll remove the standoff, and I'm going to relocate it back up here to where the RAM sits in the Dell 9020. Perfect. And again, I'm just tightening these by hand. So now, looking in this case, I'm going to look at my motherboard orientation. Looks like my I/O panel is going to match up nicely, and I'm just specifically looking in these little holes. Now I'm going to use the fine thread rounded top screws that you see here. And I like to usually put one kind of central in the board so that I can use it to pivot the board and move it around. Just making sure everything lines up. Working my way around the board, installing a motherboard. For my chassis intrusion detector, I'm actually going to cover it up with a piece of gaffer tape. We'll come back and see if we can run without that. I'm going to shove that out of the way here for now. So next, for the thermocouple in the case, I'm going to find a place that I can put that, preferably where there's airflow, to see if the inside of my case is getting warm. Now, I mentioned the I/O shield. This is where it gets interesting. So you can take this existing I/O shield that they have right here, and for testing purposes, I'm going to plug it right onto the board. I'm just going to tuck it out of the way. Now, I'm not going to use the included USB 3. We're going to use the one that comes from the front of this case, which means my audio and my USB 2 are not going to work right out of the box, but I don't need those. Now for inserting the graphics card next, I want to be very sure I know exactly which slot covers to pull, because in this Talos M1 the slot covers are permanent and they're not reinstallable, and they don't include any spares, which is I believe an oversight, but you can take these and remove them by hand. I know that I'm going to use at least these two, but I do like the fact now that I have room for expansion if I wanted to add some more. So I can insert my graphics card here, making sure that it lines up. And then these ones use the coarse thread screws. These use the coarse thread screws on these slots. So a lot of my remaining install is going to happen from the back side of the computer. So I'm going to switch the cameras around here, and I'm going to show you the rest of the installation that we need to do from the back panel, with the back panel removed. So we've been making some good progress on the Dell 9020 transplant into the Talos M1 case, but got a few things to do from the back side here. So the next stop is to take the screws out of the back side of the case here and open it up. So now you can see our motherboard is installed and our power supply and other items are here. I'm going to need to remove the power supply that we had in here for testing the RGB, and I'm going to install our new power supply. Now we don't have a modular power supply. If you did, it would be great because it's going to cut down greatly on the number of cables that we're going to have here. So this is my old temporary bench power supply. And this is my new EVGA power supply that I'm going to install. Okay. Now I'm going to orient it upward so that the fan is blowing up, and it looks like this case has two options. You can either have it blow out of the bottom of the case, or pull or draw from the bottom of the case, or you can have it blow out the top. I'm going to have it blow out the top here. And it looks like the power supply mount is actually cushioned, which is kind of nice to see. So I'm going to use a couple more coarse thread screws here to mount this. Okay. So now I have all of my power cables. The motherboard power cable is the one that we had to adapt in the last video. And by utilizing this adapter, I can take a 24 pin and make it into the proprietary 8 pin that we see here. So that's one that I know has to route up here through the case. I'm just looking for the best place to figure out how to get it to mount. And it looks like if I come up through this area, that's the shortest route to it. Now I'm going to have to do some stuff to make sure that I can get it behind here. Make sure everything gets as tight as I can, because I've got a cable management challenge here. So I've put the motherboard 8 pin in. I'm going to need some power for my drives. The next one I need is power for my video card. Now I can run that directly up if I would like from the bottom, or if I want to route it through here, I can have it follow the plane of the video card. So these connectors with the larger 4 pin for the front fans and LCD are called Molex connectors, and the power supply is going to have a few of those. Look like that. So I'm going to need to run those. We're also going to need a couple SATA for the hard drives. So there's one SATA for the drive, and I don't know if I will be able to reuse it for the other drive. I think if I come up through here, it's going to be too long. So I'm going to need one SATA for one set of hard drives. I'm going to need another SATA for the other. There's also motherboard power that we're going to need to put on here. So I'm going to slide this through. And don't worry, I will show you exactly where these came from and where they go when they get to the other side. It's going to be a tight one, but it fits just fine. Okay, I'm going to reserve now one cord set here for my SATA hard drive. And I think I'm going to put the drive on the bottom just to give myself a little bit of extra room here. And on these Dell tool-free designs, you can remove them like so, just by pushing sideways on those. And on this one, it looks like it's got a couple indentation tabs. Now, you may want to secure this, and I think I'm going to secure it with at least one screw through the bottom here, just because Murphy's Law here. I don't want this rattling out of its cage or falling out of my transport. So, I'm going to put one to hold it in like so, and I can slide this drive now into this hidden. This is my big storage drive for all the games that we've been testing, and then I've got the SATA drive, the SSD drive here that we've been mounting. Now I could hide this drive in here and you wouldn't see it at all. In fact, that's not a bad look. I was going to put it on the other side, but I think that I like the idea of hiding this one. If I had a tray, I would do that. I'm going to show you guys how you can mount it if you did want to mount it. So there's different screw threads here. I'm going to look for the fine thread screws. I'm going to put this in the upper spot here. So this is going to be an interesting challenge with the size of this case and coming from this side. And essentially what I'm going to do is mount this here, find a hole, and then I'm going to put the screw in. First time. Okay, another screw. If you did want to mount this SSD drive on the inside, now it would probably be easier to run the SATA power cables to the drive while it was free, but nothing too easy is worth it. So later when somebody's taking apart this case and they go, man, did that guy put all 4 screws in the drive? I'm going to have to be the one that says, yeah, that was me. So this SATA power cable, this is the Molex one. I'm going to leave that out here. This is the SATA power cable. I'm going to take one and I'm going to utilize it down here for my drive, and I'm going to hide the rest of it underneath that bottom hard drive, because I don't have a very pretty way to run these, but I can use the extra space under the drive for my extra cabling. So there's one. throw that extra cable underneath there. And then I'm going to need a SATA. I'm going to take this out of this hole to the lower side of the motherboard where the SATA ports are. And then this 90 degree is the right direction to fit on here, so it's going to fit pretty tight. Now the next one is actually for my hard drive, so I can do this a couple which ways. I can use this one and actually go backwards through the hole. And it's at a 90 degree angle, so I'm going to angle it in the other port. See if I've got the right way to do this. So, yeah. And then I'll just go straight up into the drive over here. So I can tuck the rest of my motherboard power out of the way as much as possible. This is where I believe all those wire ties are going to pay off. So I'm going to take this motherboard connector and I'm going to run it beyond here. And I'm going to wire tie it to one of these open wire tie holes. Just so that it lays flat when we put the back panel on. This is the Motherboard IO loom here. Like I said, there's a few of these that are going to be a no-brainer. Like this USB 3 is going to go right in through here and connect up. But some of these other ones we're going to have to work on. So power LED we're not going to be able to use. Power switch we're actually going to route up top. Show you where we're going to connect that. Okay, hard drive LED we're not going to connect, and these other ones we're not going to connect. So that's it for now. That is the back of our case. We're going to leave that open in case we need to come back here. And these USB headers we're not going to use either presently. I'm going to have to get the SATA power to the hard drive. Now we're connected. Perfect. We're going to leave that side open. Okay, so now if you try to turn your Dell computer on at this point, it's not going to post, meaning it's not going to boot up. And you're going to need to wire the power switch in. But to make that power switch work properly, there's a trick here. So in the upper corner of the motherboard, right here, I pulled off that cover and there's 5 pins for the power switch. Now you can borrow the power switch from your other case if you're going to toss that case anyway. Or another option is if you have an old hard drive with a jumper, you just need a jumper, whether it came from an old computer, other device that's got jumpers on it, but you need some sort of jumper that you can jumper these pins. So there's the jumper right there. And you want to cover the middle set of pins. So there's 2 on this side, 2 there, and 1 there. So you want to cover the middle set of pins. You need to cover that because that's the LED thing to fake that it has a real power switch. And then I'm going to put a regular power switch on And here's the moment of truth. We're going to turn the case on for the first time. So I'm going to switch over the power switch, and there we go. Okay, I've made a couple small modifications I wanted to tell you about. So up in here, you can see just before the memory, there is that jumper, and then there's the power switch connector. So power switch connector goes on the very front 2 pins, the jumper goes on the middle pin, and the back pin is open. And thanks PC Tech Reviews, that's the source for this. You don't have to do any splicing, any cutting, nothing special here. The other thing is we had an error when it started up that it needed the rear chassis fan. So what I've done is I've actually changed this a little bit. You can tell now. I have installed the rear chassis fan in the upper fan location here so that the air is blowing out, and then the air is blowing out through this one. So air comes in through the front, goes up through here, and then goes out these upper areas. And now I can push the front panel button and the power turns on with the front button. You don't have a power LED or hard drive status light on the front yet, but that's what you're giving up by not having to do any sort of cutting, splicing. We're just using the parts the way they are. And technically, if I pan down here, the front panel IO shield is sitting right there, and the only thing active on it, let's see, so back down in here is this front panel IO right there. So the only thing active in the old shield is the USB 2 and the audio jacks. Now technically you shouldn't be using those audio jacks anyway for quality. You want to use the back ones no matter what. And the USB 2 you're not using. The USB 3 header for the new USB 3, which I could see you using, is now plugged in, and you have those available up top. I may in a future video put together information on how to get that lower IO header and socket converted over to be used, if I can find a very easy and simple way to do it. So the transplant is complete. There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is a Dell 9020 through and through inside a Talos M1 ATX case. And you can see here my service tag, expect service code, and I need to check my drivers because my BIOS was reset during the update, so I had to do some installation work. But see here, it's a complete system. I'm going to take all the drivers except for the BIOS. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end of my video. If you liked what you saw here, do me a solid, hit the like button down below. If you really want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button, and if you want YouTube to actually let you know they're there, hit the bell. Thanks again, and check out links to these other videos you might like.